Welcome to Knife Thoughts. This video is going to be a full review of this knife, and this is the Finch Runtly XL. And this is a knife that I was really excited that Spencer of Finch Knives sent along for review, because it's one that I've actually kind of been looking forward to since before it was even announced. And so what does that mean? I don't, have a crystal ball to see the future of what's coming out or anything like that, but rather I was introduced to Finch Knives because I was at River's Edge Cutlery. I go there when I go to a jiu-jitsu tournament that's nearby, and they had the Runtly, which was Finch's first model, and they were planning to do a pass around. And I was really lucky enough to get to be the first leg of the pass around of the original Finch Runtly. And so I was really impressed by it. I was impressed by the build quality, and particularly the fact that it was inspired by kind of vintage fishing lures and the whole thought process behind it. But the Finch Runtly is a very small knife. It has a 2.25 inch edge or blade, and that's a pretty small blade. For me, in modern knives, I usually carry in the around 3.5 inch range, something like the classic Benchmade Griptilian. But 3 inches is great also, like on classic EDC knives like the Spyderco Native 5. So, 2.25 inches, a little small for me on a modern knife, because I often do carry a traditional knife also. Really appreciated the knife for its design and its quality, but at the time, I thought that it would be really cool to see a bigger version of the Runtly. And so when I saw that Finch was coming out with the Runtly XL, I was really excited. And I've gotten to, check out and review several Finch knives since then. They always have really great quality. It seems like they do a lot of quality control, making sure that not only are they made well, but they're really looking to make sure that the actual knife that they send out that you get as the customer is well built. And I really appreciate that. And that's very true of this knife also. One thing that is really cool on these Finch knives is not only do they have that interesting design kind of flavor or inspiration to them, but they do it really well. So this one is in M390, a really good steel. There's this weird thing in the knife industry that as soon as a new steel comes out, like MagnaCut, every other steel is like, oh, poo, it's, but M390 is a great steel. And at this point, companies are doing it really well also. So you don't really have to worry about it not being heat treated right. This is going to be heat treated really well, and M390 is a great steel, definitely a super steel. So I appreciate that it has that great steel on it. And then as you can see, it has really nice material. So it's titanium on this bolster, titanium on the clip, and then, like I said, this is the dark side carbon fiber version, which is kind of a classic woven carbon fiber. There are other versions, with colors in them and things like that, but this one is just as classic as it gets. You can't really beat carbon fiber and titanium, particularly together. And this is really nice carbon fiber. So you can see there is some contouring on it, so you can see some of that pattern in there, and it's really nice. You can see there's really no voids or anything like that. Just classic, classy carbon fiber. And speaking of those kind of traditional design inspirations, I really appreciate that it has this bolster. I think that it really elevates it and makes it just look, again, like the carbon fiber, like a classy knife. And that's important, especially on a larger knife like this. So I really do appreciate this titanium bolster. The titanium, milled titanium pocket clip is a great, choice also to offset the look of the carbon fiber on this side. And speaking of, offset or inset, this is an inset frame lock. So, it is the liner. They are integral. The bolster and the liners are integral, one piece, but it is inset into the carbon fiber cover there. I really like inset frame locks. They're nice and simple in how you use them, but they look really good because it maintains that bolster look. So I really appreciate that from the aesthetic side standpoint. And it's also, you know, it's a frame lock. Everybody knows how to use a frame lock, and they work well. So I love the look of this knife. I think that it's really, really classy looking on the handle, and then the blade is very striking looking. So this is what I would call kind of like a modified sheepfoot. You know, it's closer to a sheepfoot than a cleaver, I think, but maybe that's coming from my, you know, background as being interested in traditional knives, and because of this nail nick. It doesn't really strike me as a cleaver where you would see like a hole through the blade and maybe more of an upturn towards the corner or the angle that goes from the spine to the tip. So to me, it's maybe like what GAC would call a ram foot, like a modified, modernized ram foot or sheep foot. I really like it. I think that it's a really cool blade. It is a very tall blade. I believe it's 1.75 inches tall in this dimension here. So it's definitely a tall blade, and that means that it does stick out from the handle a good bit. But it's not an overly long blade. So this is the XL version of the Runtly, but you know, in this case, XL doesn't really mean what it means with some other knives. You know, this is not a cold steel XL. So the blade length is actually just 3 inches on this. So the great thing about that is that a lot of places there are blade length, you know, restrictions, and 3 inches is a very common one. For me, I don't have to worry about that, and so I do often carry longer knives, but it is only 3 inches in blade length. So if you have to worry about that, you don't have to worry about it as much here. The other thing is that even though it's a tall blade, it's not a super long, slender, kind of pointy dagger-like blade. So it's, again, a classy look in my opinion. I love how the edge just continues from the angle of the handle. So to show you what I mean there, this line of the handle just continues with the edge, and this line of the handle, so the blade well side continues with the edge, and the back side continues with the spine, or the spine side. So I really like that. I think that it gives it a very sleek look despite being a bigger knife than the original Runtly. And again, this nail nick, I think, gives it that you know, callback to traditional knives. Another thing that I was really happy about, moving on to the action of the knife, is that because of this nail nick being cut so deep, and it is cut nice and deep in there, you can use that to thumb open it, slow roll, whatever you want to call it. And I think that goes along with this, you know, idea that it's a classy knife. It's nice to be able to open a knife slowly, or even more slowly, with two hands with that nail nick, if it's something that you're carrying in an environment where you want it to look more like a gentleman's knife and less like a tactical knife. But at the same time, you also have the flipper, and it flips very nicely. The detent is well done. It's a nice crisp detent, very crisp. So you can see how it breaks out of there really nicely. And because the blade is heavy, being that it is so tall and not a full grind, it flips, you know, with authority. If you get this pressed enough, you know, enough pressure on that to break the detent, it's going to come out. So very nice flipping, and that is, like, you know, all other Finch knives I've had, something that they always have. But as you can see, it does have ball bearing pivots, so you know, it makes sense that it's nice and smooth. And mine came with absolutely no blade play even when unlocked, and when locked, it locks up nice and solid, about 50% there, no forward and back, or again, side to side. So I really like that. Just a really well-made knife, along with that really classy look. So, you know, the action's great. How does it cut? Well, it cuts really nicely, actually. That was one thing that I was a little bit, you know, apprehensive about getting this knife, because it isn't a full grind. You know, it's a kind of a saber grind. But if you look, hopefully it'll focus a little bit more. If you look at that, you can see it comes down to a relatively thin edge. I'll give you a comparison to another knife. Actually, I'll just go give you a comparison to another Finch, because I was going to show you a size comparison to this. This is the Finch Buffalo Tooth. Looks like I didn't necessarily clean it off completely after the last time I used it. But if you look there, and I don't know how well it's going to focus, but the Runtly XL is actually a little thinner at the edge than the Buffalo Tooth is. And it's definitely thinner than, you know, larger, more tactical EDC type knives. You can see this Cold Steel 8010 Light, much thicker. No surprise there, but just to really make it clear that even though it's not a full grind, it does come down to a pretty reasonable edge, and it cuts well. And it kind of goes along with this whole idea of this being a larger gentleman's knife or a larger classy knife, that it really looks and works like a, you know, a utility knife on steroids. So in a suit. So, you know, it looks like a utility knife in a way because it has the straight edge, but it also kind of works like that because, you know, you can use it really well for the tip for pull cuts, like cutting open tape on boxes and such, and also push cuts cutting cardboard, so just pushing the edge through it. Now, one thing that I do a lot is cut food into small bite sizes for my son, and I don't think that this blade shape is the best for that because, you know, you can't really get much of the edge down when you're cutting like this, so you have to do it as a pull cut, but really no issue there. I mean, it basically works like a sheep foot. So, you know, it works well, and I think especially for the task that you would be doing if you were carrying this more as a larger gentleman's knife. So opening boxes, opening mail, cutting tape, all those kinds of things where, you know, the tip for pull cuts and the main edge for push cuts is gonna, you know, work exactly like what you need. So I'm overall just really impressed with this knife. It's not hard to carry, in my opinion, despite having this tall blade, because it's not really that big of a knife overall, you know, in the grand scheme of things. But I do carry larger knives, so I want to show you a couple size comparisons. So again, here is the Benchmade Griptilian, and I'm showing you the closed kind of so that you can see what it would be like to carry in your pocket. It's a little taller than the Griptilian for sure, but then comparison, if you ever carry something like a Cold Steel 8010 Light, it's definitely nowhere near that size. So it just depends on what you're used to carrying and comfortable carrying. Here again is the Buffalo Tooth, not too much, you know, less wide at its widest point, actually maybe more wide. So very similar. And then I'll give you some length comparisons. So here is the Runtly XL. I'll show you the Buffalo Tooth since I have it right here. You can see it's definitely a little shorter, but also very tall. And then here is the Civivi Elementum. Very similar in blade length, not exactly the same, but very similar, and a little shorter in the handle, the Elementum. But here is a Wee Banter. You can see it's also similar, a little shorter in the blade and definitely shorter in the handle, but very similar. And so I would put this Runtly XL again in the EDC size for most people. It's a little tall in the blade, but I think it's going to carry fine in most pants. And I really do think, you know, a good way to put this is that this is a utility knife on steroids in a suit. It looks great, it works really well, and it's going to cut for all your normal EDC tasks that maybe a utility knife would do fine for, but you want to have something nice, you deserve something nice, and the Finch Runtly XL fits the bill. So again, I really appreciate getting to check out this knife. If you are interested, I have links in the description of places where you can get them. And if you like this type of video, make sure you subscribe, click the bell, and select all. Check out my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like these and knife-related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.